It's time to ask the old guy as the Carolina Panthers are fully back in training camp. It is exciting. And training camp for the first time, not the first time, first time in a while, I guess, is in Charlotte at Bank of America Stadium, which I don't know if it makes it easier for Darin Gantt or not. It is all about you, Darin Gantt, as we asked the old guy, Darin Gantt, Panthers.com. I'm sure it makes it a little bit more convenient, maybe not super great, but a little bit more convenient to have everything so close to home.
A little bit, but if we start making this all about me, they're going to give me a job at a newspaper again, Adam. The story's about the football team.
All right.
They don't have to move all their stuff from Charlotte to Spartanburg and back in the span of 3 weeks. So, for that standpoint, I mean, it's more practical for everybody because, the things you don't think about, like, having to move an entire weight room.
Right.
Having to move the entire athletic training apparatus into a brand new place and move it back. All the computers and IT that have to go back and forth. There's all those millions of little things that you can do your daily job in the same place every day the same way. It's just a lot more convenient.
I'm sure it's good for you as working for Panthers.com. They probably asked you to move a lot of the heavy equipment. All right, let's get to the most fascinating thing that I heard over the first few days had nothing to do with Bryce Young, believe it or not. I was impressed by the fact that J.C. Horn had a very smart sense of it's time for me to play, not just play well. He recognized that less than 50% of the games that he's been available for. He understands that he's got to stay on the field. To me, that's job one.
Yeah, self-awareness is a good thing. We value it in people, and that's not just a football comment. JC gets it, and one of the things it's interesting. We posted a story today on the website. This defense is brand new, and he's kind of in the middle of it. If you think about it, there's Derek Brown, there's J.C. Horn, and sort of Shaq Thompson, but Shaq missed all of last year practically after breaking his ankle in week 2. So you've got a consistent staff and a consistent scheme, but then it's J.C. and Derek and a bunch of new guys. So I think it's going to be fascinating to see how he develops as a player. Hopefully J.C. is able to stay on the field because when he's been out there, he's been one of the better corners in the game. He's really good at this football. He's just not been great at availability, and obviously that's a big deal. And he knows that. So, I thought, people are free to ask whatever they want to ask. It was weird to ask JC about contracts because, again, I wouldn't – if I was a team, I wouldn't necessarily be thinking about extending him right now. And if I was him, I wouldn't want to negotiate an extension now because you're not exactly dealing from a position of strength.
Right.
So the fact that he's thinking about getting himself getting himself on the field and staying there is a pretty big deal.
Yeah, and the fact is they picked up his fifth-year option already, so there's plenty of time to hash all that out. Offensively speaking, I'm going to assume – look, I don't have to assume. It was incredibly unfair the way people talked about Bryce Young last year because it almost didn't matter if he was good or if he was bad. We had no chance to be able to tell the difference because there just wasn't enough around him. Everything has been improved. Forget about the coaching, although I assume the coaching will be improved. Everything around him looks better than it did a year ago.
Yeah, it's not a stretch to say it. And then, you know how this goes, having seen the cycle of life in sports, professional and otherwise. The old guy gets fired, everything gets blamed on the old guy. And the people who aren't here anymore, because they're the easiest to blame, because they're not around to defend themselves anymore. That being said, it has to be better because last year was an abject disaster. Everything about it should be killed with fire. But a wise man told me early in my career, you've got to be careful about judging any individual part of a bad situation because you don't know how much of it is their fault individually versus the systemic failure. And that's how I'm kind of approaching Bryce this year. I'm just, it's almost like a do-over, a redshirt year or something like that, whatever you want to call it. you can't really apply a lot of those lessons. The only thing Bryce really benefits from is having a year's worth of scar tissue, knowing what the calendar looks like, knowing what the rhythms of the NFL
Going beyond the box scores. Adam Gold on the North Carolina Sports Network.
What this offense is going to look like. We don't know yet how good Dave Canales is going to be at calling plays for this collection of people. But what I can tell you is Dave Canales talks an awful lot about running the ball, and it's interesting. When I asked him yesterday about this new defense, he said something. He was like, well, I truly believe that the most important thing you can do is run the ball and stop the run. And I started having flashbacks for a minute. I thought it was Foxy or Ron Rivera or Dom Capers even. I was like, wait, you're new and young and handsome. You're not supposed to be saying things like that, Dave. But he talks an awful lot about running the ball, running it stubbornly. If you want a hot take coming out of this training camp, take the over on Chuba Hubbard rushing yards this year, because I think he's got an opportunity to really play well. If you think about structurally what they've done, they fixed that offensive line from the inside out by moving Austin Corbett in the center and spending $150 million on 650 pounds of guard. A guy who can run inside benefits from that. And, oh, by the way, a left tackle in Ike Ekwonu who's a better run blocker than pass blocker.
Right.
So I'm bullish on Chuba this offseason, and not just because he's one of the hardest working people I've ever seen walk through the door of the place. He's turned himself into a player, and he's taken things he used to be really, really bad at, like catching passes, and through the sheer force of work, fix them and become proficient at it. So I've got all the respect in the world for the kid for remaking himself mid-career and putting himself in a position to benefit.
Yeah, and Jonathan Brooks there as the second-round pick out of Texas obviously will add to the running back room. Let's talk about
eventually. Eventually.
You think?
I think it's important to remember that we ain't going to look at Jonathan Brooks for a minute. If he plays in the first month of the season, that's probably an upset.
Okay.
So give him time, get himself well. I mean, he's coming off an ACL,
right?
And I think the longer you can let that thing heal,
sure,
the stronger you are on the backside of it. And I think there's a recognition that was not a draft pick for immediate impact for a Super Bowl run or anything.
All right, Darin Gantt, Panthers.com. We are asking the old guys. So
almost did it. You almost got fined. You almost said Rock Hill Herald. Or
yes, I did. I was going to go Rock Hill Herald. I was going to go Rock.
Classics, they never go out of style.
Xavier Liggett was unhappy with his first day at training camp. It's kind of strange. He was unhappy because he felt like he took some plays off more than he didn't perform well. I mean, I'm not reading anything into that there, but we know what kind of talent he's got. Also, listen to Bryce Young talk about how Jonathan Mingo looks a little bit different. I've read, I think from you, that Young and Deontay Johnson are becoming fast friends on the practice field.
Thing, those two.
Yeah. So, last year it was Adam Thielen, and that was it. And this year it seems like there's just a lot more options.
Yeah, I think so, and I think that's the right way to fix that problem. When everything's broken, throw as many potential fixes at it as you can and see what happens. I just think that, again, not to lean too much into last year, but it was so bad it can't help but be better.
Yeah.
But just watching those practices now, I think Mingo is a guy who probably we're not talking about enough. Now, granted, it's 2 days into camp. We're going to talk about them all before we get to the regular season. But Mingo is a guy who got a lot of reps in the spring because Deontay Johnson's going to be – he's pretty good. He knows how to get open, and that there weren't enough of those last year here. But while Deontay was out working out on his own at his home base, Mingo was here running around with the ones taking his reps. So he's looked a lot sharper. I think Mingo was a guy who just hit the wall. In the absence of decent options last year, that kid was taking every rep in practice from the minute he walked in the door, and he looked worn out by the end of the year. He looked like he didn't have a thing left. So seeing him this spring, he's a guy who could potentially benefit. And let's be honest. I mean, Deontay Johnson's here on kind of a mercenary one-year contract.
Yeah.
He's trying to maximize his value so he can be a free agent in a year. Adam Thielen's almost as old as me and you. You never know how. Well, that's not even remotely true. He's not. He's probably. Well, he's more than half our age, but still, the point stands. He's not going to be a long-term answer. So I think when you look at these practices in the summer and see see Mingo, that's probably the future of the offense right there. So I'm kind of curious to watch those guys and how they grow.
The interesting thing about Thielen, and yes, he is more than half of my age, but not significantly so. The
math is hard, and I prefer we not do it right now on this particular topic.
Yeah, I'm having a lot of math conversations today, as it turns out. So, to me, he was like a tight end last year, right? He was that underneath between. He caught some stuff on the edges, but a lot of it was underneath. He was the hot read for Bryce Young, the security blanket, really acting as what a great tight end would be like for a young quarterback, like a Greg Olsen for a young Cam Newton, even Jeremy Shockey, right? So this is, to me, now it's perfect because as you get more options on the outside and you get more speed options, Thielen can be easily used as that safety valve, that security blanket. And then you've got working in the other tight ends. Look, I don't know how good the offense is going to be. It'll be better. But I just think that there are more things for the defense to deal with. So let me, before we have to say goodbye, we haven't really talked about Bryce. Your thoughts on what you have seen from not the on-field stuff. We've only had a couple of days, and I know he's great, 4 for 4 in 7-on-7s in day one. But what are your thoughts on what we have seen, at least in terms of the appearance of Bryce?
Bryce seems more comfortable. Here's a news flash. Here's an exclusive. Here's some breaking news. Bryce Young actually has a personality. I've seen it with my own two eyes.
Right.
He looks a lot more comfortable in his own skin this year. I mean, he was kind of a quiet guy walking in the door, and we all knew that. I mean, you could tell that when he was at Alabama. But then after being under siege for 6 months, if he looked shell-shocked last year, there's a good reason for that.
Yeah.
So I don't particularly hold anything last year against him in a lot of ways, but he's kind of walked in the door this year. He's a little more self-possessed. He's a little more, kind of aware of the system. And I think as he just gets more and more comfortable, all the things that are true. This is no lie, and I don't know if this is breaking news, but this is a little teaser for you. In talking to some of the old heads about Julius Peppers stuff for the Hall of Fame coming up next weekend, I had a conversation with Dan Henning. And Dan Henning, the old offensive coordinator, whom I hold in great esteem, was talking about Bryce. He still follows the game and is familiar with all the people in it. And he was like, Vince Lombardi used to talk about wanting his quarterback to make more plays for his team in the fourth quarter than for the other team, and he found that guy in Bart Starr. And he said, Bryce can be that kind of quarterback, play with a good defense, play with a good run game, take care of the ball. Bart Starr was a 17th round pick, and by the way, happens to be in the Pro Football Hall of Fame. And again, I ain't putting Bryce in the Hall of Fame too soon. And you got to get good at football before you can be considered great at it. But I think the point stands in that the stuff Bryce is good at is taking care of the ball. Even last year in all the abject disaster, he didn't throw that many picks considering.
Right.
So it could have been so much worse, and it wasn't necessarily. So if Bryce takes care of the ball, if Bryce spreads it around to more targets, and most importantly, if Bryce turns around and hands it off 250 or 300 times this year, I think he's in a position to be better. We'll see how much better, and we'll see whether that actually turns into good.
All right, next time we talk, Darin Gantt, because you mentioned the Hall of Fame and Julius Peppers going in. Next time we talk, we will have a conversation about potentially Cam Newton being a Pro Football Hall of Famer. Is that fair?
That's fair. Build in an extra long segment.
I know.
I think I could talk about that all day long.
I know you can.
I have thoughts.
I have already forecast that out. I have not warned people, but told people that you are very bullish on that possibility, and we'll have that conversation next time.
It's like an after-school special in a very special episode. Darin Gantt says,
I watched a lot of after-school specials. Darin Gantt is the from Panthers.com is the old guy in the bubble, starring John Travolta. I will talk to you very soon. Thank you so much.
You got it. Anytime.